I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Yair Panet from Wizits. Yair and I met in Tel Aviv at Casual Connect Tel Aviv. A good friend of mine, Damon Goraz, he said, hey, I want you to meet this guy, really smart, not that good looking, but I didn't say it, Damon said it. He said, no, you got to meet this guy, he's got a great team. And we met at the very end of Casual Connect Tel Aviv. And he said, well, you know, with all the traffic, the only way to get to my office is if you were willing to hop on the back of my scooter. And so I hopped on the back of his scooter, and Yair and I got to know each other very well.
You got in safely.
So we got safe to his office, a great guy. Looking forward to talk. Yair Panet.
Okay, so I'm Yair. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wizits. We're a social casino startup based in Tel Aviv. We're a team of 9 people. For me, this is my 11th year in the gaming industry. I was the head of poker for Playtech. I was a consultant to quite a few real money gaming operators. And we have 3 apps on the market today. We've been building the product for about 3 years, putting a lot of hard work, putting a lot of sweat, a lot of energy into it. And today I want to talk about the lessons I've learned, or some of the lessons I've learned from building a social casino startup. So I want to start off by asking, what is a startup? And more importantly for this talk, what is a startup in the context of social casino? You'll see that, first of all, the definition of a startup is very different across industries, across countries. But definitely not every new company is a startup. Not every underfunded company is a startup. So Dave McClure from 500 Startups basically defines a startup as a company that's confused about one of these 3 elements. Now, number 3 is very well defined for social casino. You'll see that almost all startups, all companies either do in-app advertising, in-app purchases. But 1 and 2 are interesting because you see different companies taking different routes. You see a lot of, not a lot, but you see some great companies that have a very clear strategy for their product and for their market. And they're usually trying to go for what is called a red ocean strategy. They're trying to basically fight the big companies by outperforming them. Hopefully, and usually these companies will be well funded from the start. And not necessarily, and in my opinion, are they considered a startup, because when you have such a well-defined product strategy and a market strategy, you're operating in a completely different way. So the lessons I'm going to talk about today are basically from my personal experience. I consider us a startup. We started the company, 3 founders. We were working very late, very hard, and we went through the entire startup phase, friends and family, raising funds, bringing the first employees. So again, this is, of course, from a very personal experience. And we knew that we wanted to innovate from the first day. We knew that we didn't have a choice in this market, and also that was our passion, and innovation is a great way to kind of breed passion within a team. And that's my first lesson, is first of all, innovate. If you're a startup, you're not going to outperform the Slotomanias, the IGTs, you know, the Zyngas, the great products that are already on the market. It's not a viable strategy to try and over-execute. You don't have the funds, you don't have the resources, you're not going to have the manpower to do it. So that is the first benefit of innovation, of course, is that this is the only thing that you actually provide to players that will make them love you, or make them love your experience, because you're giving them something different, something they can get only within your app. Other benefits of innovation is that it keeps your team very agile, very flexible, very strong. Comfort zones, development comfort zones, and product comfort zones are probably one of the worst things, in my opinion. When anyone is in a comfort zone, they're very far from their best work. And also, when your team is flexible, then when that opportunity comes, basically what happens is you can be much more agile. You're used to moving fast. You're used to thinking outside the box. Another very important aspect of innovation is that it increases your value to investors, to potential M&A partners. Basically, by showing innovation, you're showing that you think outside the box, that you have the ability to do things that are different, think big, think in a different way, and try to conquer the market from a different strategy than everything that's out there. When we innovated, we found that the most important metric to focus on early on is retention. Retention is like a vote by the players. Do I like you, or do I like you or don't I like you? Especially short-term retention, day 1, day 3, day 7. If by your innovation, whatever it is you're innovating, it doesn't have to be big things. I mean, I view innovation as something that happens on all scales of features. Retention is the first thing that should be impacted, because if you're innovating, that means that you're affecting the user experience. If you're affecting the user experience, that should show up in your retention numbers. After focusing on retention, now try to understand how the hell you make money from all this innovation, because it's not the same thing. I'll talk a little bit in detail about that in a second. Something very important, all that said, don't A/B test your strategy. You need to have a clear vision. You need to understand where you want your product to be a year from today. Even if you don't know exactly what the innovation is going to be, you need to understand the essence of your innovation and the parts of the product that you think you can improve, the parts of the market that you can rethink. Now, there's a school of thought in startups called the Lean Startup. It was started by a guy called Eric Rice. I recommend to everyone to read the book. It's an amazing book, and it talks about basically a framework for innovation, basically how you go about innovation. It's not just about throwing ideas and building them and hoping something catches. So first of all, very important is that when you innovate, you start off by the smallest, what is called the minimum viable product. It's basically the smallest version that still has all the functionality needed, but not one line of code more than that. And then you test out what you're doing through metrics, through all the tools that you have. And of course, if you see that users keep being happy, you can build upon that. Now, if you were to try and basically build a regular social casino, try to build another Slotomania, you're basically going on the upper route, and you're basically trying to build a car, but your players aren't going to be happy, because by the time you reach a full product, first of all, you'd be bankrupt, probably anywhere between 1 and 2. And by then, you know, the market is going to be at a completely different place, probably building spaceships or Teslas or whatever. So the Lean Startup talks about something called a feedback loop, and it's something that we've been using a lot when we build and when we innovate. And it starts off by building your product based on your previous experiences, based on your market research, based on your gut, whatever it is. Then you measure the effect that whatever you built had. Again, it can be a full product, it can be a feature. You measure it through a tool set called innovation accounting. Innovation accounting basically means that you know from the start which KPIs you're trying to impact, and you need to make sure you're very focused on measuring. After you measure, you learn. If it went well, you continue innovating in that direction. If it didn't, you need to look. Maybe the messaging was wrong. Maybe you need to pivot. Pivot isn't necessarily a huge kind of moment in the company that everyone realizes, oh my God, we have to change everything. Pivots can be smaller pivots. There's many types of pivots. We in Slotogram started off the company building slot machines, and we wanted to innovate on the content side. So we basically built slot machines that had dynamic content within them, and we integrated with Instagram. You could basically build a slot machine with your favorite celebrities, with your own pics. You could bring in pics from your phone gallery. And while players loved that feature, we saw that actually the ones that loved that feature were not the ones that were paying, and the ones that were paying didn't really use that feature. And by going within that feedback loop, we were able to quite effectively find out what we needed to do, how we needed to do it, and eventually we did something called a zoom out pivot, where it became a smaller part of a bigger picture of our product. So, another very important lesson, you have to live your product. You're a product company, you're not a marketing company, and you're not a technology company. You're building user experiences. Now, my first most important lesson from that is don't outsource. Build everything in-house. I like to say that a startup that outsources its technology is like a restaurant that brings in catering. It's not that you're not going to be able to serve food. It's just that it's not going to have a lot of soul, and probably, again, users are going to vote with their feet, as we say. And in a startup, the distance between development and product needs to be almost zero. I'm very proud to say that we never wrote one BRD, or like product specification document, for our developers. We sit down, we talk, we decide what we want to build, and if there's any questions, my door is just next to theirs, and they can come in and ask. And that is exactly the mentality that I think a startup should have. You need to be very coherent in what you try to provide your players. By innovating, you're actually asking your players to invest in you. They need to invest their minds. They need to understand what the hell you're trying to tell them, what the hell you want them to experience. If you're not coherent, you won't be able to measure if your innovation actually has merit or it's just not understandable. Also important to be consistent. Again, you need to understand where you want your product to be. You can't just innovate on a million different parts of the product and just keep going. You need to be very consistent, because eventually you want players to be used to innovation and not be afraid of it, but you also want players to feel comfortable with it. Especially the demographic for slot machines is quite an older demographic, and they might be afraid of innovation that doesn't seem like it has an underlying concept behind it. But very important, don't forget your core proposition. You are still a casino company. You're still building a social casino. That means that your slot machines need to be top. Again, a lot of lessons that I've learned from Al, how to build a good slot machine, a lot of the things that we did wrong and a lot of the things that we did right. Eventually, the only way you're going to make money is if your slot machines are good. The mathematics, the design, everything needs to be correct. Everything, even if the production value isn't going to be at the levels of the incumbents, it still has to be 100% perfect, and a slot machine player needs to feel at home and be able to sit down and play 1 hour, 2 hour sessions. Portfolio strategy. I'm a huge believer in portfolio strategy for this industry. Anyway, I believe that you almost have to be agnostic to the question of, is it a separate app or not? I mean, an app is a delivery method for your product, but basically you need to build your product, and if a separate app is the right way to go, then of course you need to do it. For startups, portfolio strategy is twice more important, and it's almost like a godsend. Why? If we go back to the lean startup thinking, by implementing a portfolio strategy, you can actually run almost tests on separate products. If you have an innovation that you're afraid to put it within your main app because it affects the entire user experience, you can have that as a separate app. Now, I divided our portfolio strategy into 3 groups, and I think all 3 are relevant for social casino startups. The first one is product niches, Old Vegas, as a great example of a niche. There's a lot of niches. Talked about Jelly Button before, a huge casino that have great social features. You see a lot of different companies innovating and finding their niches. And product niches is the first group. The second one is brand and brand partnerships. One of the things that I found is that brand and IP holders are actually a lot more open to partnerships with startups, because you can offer them business models that the big companies aren't willing to offer them, and that gives you a great opportunity to actually get great either content, again, or some kind of intellectual property. The last one is localized. Find a media company in a country, find a partner in a country that understands a specific market, that can guide you through it. Find content providers that have hyper-localized content, and by executing a portfolio strategy, you'll be able to go after markets, again, in a strategy that's very different from a lot of other companies. This got a slide of its own because it's so important. Keep your burn rate low. Keep it low, keep it low, keep it low. It's really important. First reason is you don't want to go bankrupt, and that's one way to do it. Except for that, it keeps your whole thinking like a commando. You're working at hyper efficiency when your burn rate is low. I like to say that lean is not about being a skeleton, it's about being fast. And I think that keeping your burn rate low actually gives you flexibility and makes you better. Very important, build a stellar team. Almost obvious, but in my opinion, worth discussing. First of all, don't start the company until you have a strong team of founders. When the founders are the only ones that actually lose sleep over what's going on in the company, and they're the ones that are going to be with you in the hard times and in the good times. After you have your founders, work only with amazing employees. Find amazing employees that come to you for passion, not for money. Don't bring in mercenaries, definitely not at this stage. I'll give a shout out to my team. This is them. Very recent picture. And last but not least, keep your head up. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And that's it.
All right. Fantastic presentation. Do we have any questions for Yair? Oh, here we go. Hang on.
Hi. You said startups can offer stuff to brands that big companies can't. Like, can you specify examples?
Yeah, so revenue share is a business model that most big companies won't agree to do. I mean, aggressive revenue share deals. And brand owners, especially in social, what we found was that they're left making very little money off their brands. The reason is that usually these brands are put into an app that has 100 games, and they're just one game within 100 games. And the way that the licensing works actually leaves the brand owners without any real viable money coming from that partnership. As a startup, you're a lot more flexible, and so that's basically it.
Other questions?
You might not want to get too specific with this answer because it's your business, but roughly, in terms of the money you're bringing in, between in-app purchases, there's a few different ways to make money, show gated commercials, videos, in-app purchases. What have you seen as being most successful in the social casino world? Is it just in-app purchases? Is it videos?
Well, very recently we implemented video ads within our product as rewarded videos. In-app purchases is still the bread and butter, and videos are nice. They have other added benefits, such as they actually can improve retention for specific segments because you're giving the users another strategy. Slot machine, especially slot machine players, are looking for strategies, and actually video ads gives them another strategy. So we see that it also improves retention, and of course, it's another monetization point. But in-app purchases, you need to focus first and foremost on whales. Everyone says it, but it needs to be said every day. I mean, this business is eventually built very top-heavy in terms of the users, and your experience always has to be focused on making money from in-app purchases, and especially from that top segment that want to sit down and want to play for hours and want to experience slot machines the way they experience them in Vegas.
More questions? I have one, Yair. As a small company, it's very important that you maintain your relationships with your players, right? Lifetime value starts with a lifetime. How long can you keep them? As a small company, are you able to be hands-on with your players, your whales?
Yeah, absolutely. Not just with whales. There's also champions to your product, which is amazing to see. Even players that haven't paid us $1 but are actually giving us all this feedback and just writing to us. We like your new game. We don't like it. We have one of our employees. She's the marketing manager, and she's basically takes care of all the communication with the users. And what we found was that in a small product that actually gives you that opportunity. I also write mails to players when I see like a complaint and I'm interested to hear. I say, hi, I'm the CEO of the company and I'm really interested in hearing what you think and why you said that. And that communication you learn a lot from because again, product, technology, marketing, it's all kind of squished together in a startup. And part of that is communication with the players.
All right, any last questions?
Hi, how do you acquire users?
Well, we acquire users from doing mostly advertising on Facebook and on networks. Of course, our whole methodology behind it is very different from the big companies. We see user acquisition as almost testing budgets many times. So we won't have necessarily user acquisition all the time, but we will have bursts of it when we have a new feature or something that we think is substantially important, and then we drive a lot of user acquisition so we can analyze the data and understand, again, going back into that feedback loop, understand if what we did is actually the right way or not. As funding, increases, I mean, you will reach that point where you start having more consistent marketing, but really the user acquisition is to validate the product and, of course, be very in line with your metrics, with your ARPDAUs, with your retention, to be able to have an intelligent discussion with investors, with potential M&A partners.
Anyone else? Thank you, Yair.